Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you out there, wherever you are. Kristi, that new intro kind of threw me off a little bit. How are you doing today?
Agree. I agree. I was captivated watching it. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here, glad to be part of this new segment, and most of all, glad to be telling the story.
Yes, well said. And folks, welcome to Supply Chain Now. Welcome to a very special live stream that we've got teed up today, and those mesmerizing graphics. I tell you, timing's everything.
Yeah.
As we're telling stories, especially those that more folks need to be aware of. And today, to that end, we're kicking off a very special new initiative. So, folks, most members of our global audience and family know that we offer a wide variety of programming here at Supply Chain Now, right? Podcasts, registration driven live streams, webinars, and a whole bunch more. Well, today we're launching a more spontaneous live series of programming that we're calling Breaking News Now. Now, that's going to allow us to bring timely, highly relevant stories and news that, as we talked about, more folks have got to know about, right? So they can be in position to take action. So while Breaking News Now will always be live, you'll also be able to go back and find it on our YouTube channel or other aspects of our social channel and elsewhere. So you can go back and review in case you got to step out and miss a part of this intriguing conversation here today. So, Kristi, in this live kickoff edition, we're focusing the next half hour, 45 minutes or so on one incredible business leader that has been deeply impacted, unfortunately, tragically, like so many have, by the catastrophic wildfires in California. I really appreciate you bringing this story to us, and it should be a special but a very actionable conversation today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm grateful for thank you for jumping in with us, wanting to tell this story as well. We are huge fans of this guest, and she's been on our podcast, Logistics with Purpose. They are also a B Corp. We have partnered with them for the last couple of years on Vector's holiday gift giving, and I have followed this company since really their launch and have remained big fans. And so when the wildfires broke out, this was somebody, a friend I wanted to check in with. And of course, it's not good news, it's breaking news. And so
Right.
we're glad to have our guest on here to share her story and a little bit more about their staff and what's happening on the ground as well.
Yep. And the story hasn't ended despite how headlines shift and what's being reported. I was looking for. I had a factoid here. I want to say as of today, well, we still have fires burning across California, and I was looking for the acreage count of everything that's been burned thus far. Maybe we'll find that before we're done here today. But folks, with all of that said, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Keep your comments coming as well. And I want to welcome in our special guest here today, Janice Steverding, Chief Impact and Operations Officer with Gifts for Good. Hey, Janice, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I said the same thing when we met pre-show, and I got to strike that question. It's a stupid question to ask, especially in the backdrop that me and Kristi were talking about. But genuinely, and really appreciate you being here and sharing your experience, including, which we're going to touch on, how folks can help. Right. So, with all of that said, let's start with a little bit about your background. So, you are a Southern California native. Now, you've lived
Yeah.
your entire life, with just a few exceptions, in California. So that's where I want to start. Would you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I was born just south of LA, moved for college to Santa Barbara, then up to San Francisco, and then after my business school out of the country, moved back to Southern California and have been here ever since. And I think there is no place better in the world than Southern California. So I'm a very proud Angeleno.
Mm. And I'm glad you shared that, because we're going to touch on that later in our conversation. Kristi, I had no idea that folks that live and are from LA, they're Angelenos. I didn't know if that was a famous family or but that's a good fact to pick up. But Kristi, you've known Janice, I think, for quite some time. Is that right?
Yeah. For several years now, I've followed their company since the founding, and then had previously interacted multiple times with Laura, their CEO, and then she's the one who introduced me to Janice. And I'm a big fan of hers, and we've kept in touch over the years, and it's been terrific to watch them grow and thrive, and to see all the impactful work their team has done.
And that's a great call out because despite where we're going to focus much of today's conversation about, which is Janice's experience in the California fires, we do want to make sure that y'all know about Gifts for Good. And what we have to that end is we've got a great episode of Logistics with Purpose that we're going to drop right there in the chat. And that one, Kristi, was from a year or so ago, would you say?
A couple of years. Janice was actually one of our early guests. So when I came to Vector and started co-hosting the podcast with Enrique, I was like, no, I know exactly who I want to invite. And so Janice was an early guest, and we've actually reshared her episode several times because it's a great one. And we're very happy with the work that they do and very excited to partner with them.
So Janice, you know what she's saying there. Not only are you a VIP rock and roll star in our ecosystem, but your episode has been deemed a LWP classic.
Well, I was super excited to be on it several years ago because I think you have the best name of a podcast. And as someone who has worked in social impact, I have worked in disaster relief. Logistics is a huge component in making something work. And I think it's something we don't always think about, but in all of my work, logistics has been a huge part of it. So I think it's a great name.
Well, I'm with you. And I bet Kristi, well, I know we agree on this. Logistics and supply chain can change the world, no doubt. And I appreciate what y'all do and appreciate that perspective, Janice. So, folks, we dropped that episode right there. Please check that out. You'll want to know more about her, the business story, and of course, the company. But we want to focus next. And that happens. This is live. We get phone calls. Life doesn't stop, right? Sometimes you get mesmerized by the intro graphics, right? Life doesn't stop. But kidding aside, Janice, I read something you shared on social about a week or so ago. And part of that read like this, quote, "I love California and think it is the greatest place in the world. And while many love to hate on LA, I love LA. Watching my city burn has literally been traumatizing. It's hard to comprehend the devastation caused," end quote. So Janice, would you expound a little bit more on what you've experienced here in recent weeks?
Yeah, and I think some of it is still to come when we can actually see in like live what has happened. But so much of like entire communities wiped off the map. And like I said, I'm from Southern California. We used to have fires maybe every 10 years. I had family in the Northridge fire in '88. My parents were in a fire in 2008 where they had to, drive through the flames hitting their car. But you had certain houses would burn down, not entire communities. And this has been unlike anything I have experienced. And while I've been on the ground in disasters, it is different when it's your community. And so to see, I think the Eaton fire is about 14,000 acres, and the Palisades fire, which is the one that I'm right next to, is about 24,000. And they're not completely out. And it was very just uncertain. And I think the rebuilding is going to look quite different than previous situations.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then we'll get Kristi's response. But in just a minute, I found that note I had pre-show. All told, and this is from the NOAA. I forget what that acronym stands, but our government's weather agency, right? As of January 21st, that's yesterday, California is battling still 4 active wildfires, and a total of 37,794 acres have been burned across the state. And the worst of that is the Palisades fire at over 23,000 acres. Right. Before I want to circle back, Janice, to dive into something you shared about why it's so different. But before I do, Kristi, respond to what she shared a moment ago.
Yeah, I also want to point out that a couple of fires have also sprung up closer to San Diego as well. So there's also new fires to fight. I think one of those is already contained, but another is still going. Of course, the Santa Ana winds are still going. So a little uncertain, but yeah, it has been devastating to watch. Southern California is one of my happy places. I fell in love with it the first time I went. And for about 10 years, I was there at least once a year to just be there and soak up the sunshine and to play in Southern California because it is a beautiful, magical place. So it has been really heartbreaking to watch.
Undoubtedly. And the imagery, it's been overwhelming for all of us elsewhere, Janice. And in fact, your colleague, Laura, shared something, shared a blog article a week or two ago. We're going to drop that here in a moment. But she showed a picture of her home that she lost and how she wrote the article, quote, "The photo below is of my old home, gone forever. My memories turned to dust. The place I came home to after my wedding day, the place I lost the doggy love of my life, the place I found out I was finally pregnant," end quote. All of that just devastatingly gone. So, Janice, you're talking about how this experience, I mean, fires are part of, it sounds like fires are part of living in California, unfortunately, but this one is so different than some of those earlier ones. Why is that?
Oh, that's probably a really big question. I think that we had absolutely unprecedented winds. I mean, 100-mile an hour coming into places that it does not normally come. You had dry vegetation. I think we haven't had rain in 8 or 9 months at all. We don't have the kind of indigenous landscape. So like lots of communities, you bring in things that look pretty, but guess what? They're not drought resistant. So you have kind of a combo of tinder and winds. And, when we have big fires, they fight them from the air. But when winds get to a certain level, you just can't fly. So it was a perfect storm. There's probably a multitude of reasons, but when they all kind of come together, it just was absolutely devastating and very uncertain because you didn't know, to your point, where like I left when, I had fire coming at me from the Palisades from the west, and then a new fire popped up from the east, and I got a boil water notice, and you're just kind of like, it's a little overwhelming. Yeah.
So, and I'm glad you used that phrase "perfect storm" because that's exactly what was between my ears as you were describing that. And Kristi, one of the things that just me, I'm curious to get to learn more about kind of after the disaster has been and the ongoing disaster has been kind of contained, and we move more fully into recovery operations. Is there's lots of legal and governmental reasons why we can't use as many federal resources in the states, right? I remember when Katrina came through Louisiana, there are certain things we couldn't do that gets, I guess, constitutionally tricky to use the military in the states. And I'll leave that to the scholars and lawyers. But Janice, to your point, when you're talking about fighting from the air, until I get a really good answer, I can't understand why we don't bring the whole fleet from my beloved Air Force and plenty of other, and get these fires contained so then we can 100% make that shift to recovery. But Janice, you might have a better take on
I
that.
do. Yeah, I think some of the challenges is there's only so much airspace. You can only fly so many planes for it to be safe, and the water drops that they do into the reservoirs. So I have heard some things in the news of why aren't they using these resources? And to my understanding, I'm certainly not on the first responder in this. We were using all the resources that were safe to use.
Right.
And so you can't have too many helicopters in the same area doing the same thing.
Well, I hope I'm sure we all hope we learn from this. The worst of the worst is perfect storm.
Amen.
And so next time it'll be much more, we'll know what to do better, I guess. Kristi, we've covered a lot of ground since last time you jumped in. Your thoughts here, especially on the differences between what we're seeing now and some of the destructive fires of past years?
Yeah, I think it's just well, one of the things it's just been interesting to note as someone who doesn't love the news but watches it because it's constantly about, every headline seems to have to do with logistics. So I'm kind of watching it all day long, but it's just wild to see, like, here we are on the eastern side and we're freezing, and then you see this happening on in Southern California. And then, of course, we just moved past hurricane season, which had a devastating effect. And
Right.
so there's just so much going on, and there's so much need. And, there is a lot that you continually feel powerless about whenever you're watching this, much less living through it. And so I just also, which I know we'll pivot to in just a little bit, just want to remind everybody that there is something within your control. So whether it's starting with reading Laura's blog post, which is incredibly moving, or making a donation, or I just saw actually on the news this morning, there's a moms group where you can actually, if you're a mom with clothes that your children have outgrown, you can actually be connected to somebody who has the same age child who has lost clothes in the fire and ship it directly to them. And so there's just so many ways to help and kind of regain that sense of control and feel like you are doing something, because every person can do something.
Kristi, amen. And if we all embrace that mindset, I tell you, we would be in such a better position to tackle this awful, awful disaster or any other. So Janice, all of us kind of spoke to in what we're seeing play out on TVs and streams everywhere. And that's kind of the world we live in right now. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, I think, in many ways. We'll save that for later discussions. But we were talking about something pre-show that was really, I think, important to you, and you wish more folks would focus on certain parts of what we're seeing versus others. What is that, Janice?
Yeah, so some of what I'm saying is sort of preemptive blame. I'm sure there's going to be blame to go around. And I think every one of these, to your point earlier, is a learning experience. We absolutely need to go, what could have been better? And how do we share that? Because I'm a fan of failure reports so that others can learn, so that we can all be better as a society. But sometimes it's just too quickly to make shift some of that blame. And right now there are people, hurting. They have lost there's communities that have lost everything. If you can imagine rebuilding when your school is gone, houses of worship are gone, supermarkets are gone. The thought of rebuilding is daunting. So
Yeah.
I think telling some of the great stories of how Angelenos are helping other Angelenos, and how other people can participate with us is probably more effective. And the others will come as we learn more from a fact-based perspective.
Janice, well said. And I would just say, I think as all passionate people of supply chain management, my brain, probably like Kristi and Janice's, I go to, okay, how can we solve this problem different, like right now, right? But to your point, let's control the fires. Let's help people and invest in those tremendous operations. And then, like you said, I'm also a big fan of what'd you call it? The fail report. Yeah, we gotta learn, right? We gotta learn from those, right? They're not fun lessons, but we gotta lean into that. Kristi, what about you? What'd you hear?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a failure report is a great idea. I do think there's also, of course, when something happens, there is a lot of, as Jenny said, there's probably going to be a lot of blame to go around, but there is a lot of just blame happening. And I think, one of the things that we love at Logistics with Purpose is telling positive stories. And, Janice and her team are really amazing at that as well. And you tell a lot of great stories too. And so I think, one thing we can also do is continue to spread the positive news and the people who are helping and what is being done, and continue to not just contribute to the negativeness. There's enough. It's a heartbreaking situation, but I think it's also, again, goes back to something within our control, as we can help spread the positive news, the positive ways to help, and the people who need us.
That's right, Kristi. And even in the darkest of days, there's good news if we go looking for it. And that's one thing we talked about pre-show. I'm really looking forward, out of any tragedy, just like out of any triumph, there are these untold, unknown stories of bravery and selflessness and sacrifice and generosity. And Janice, I know whether they're Angelenos or fellow Californians or other folks jumping in the fray, there will be lots of that come out as we rebuild and tell those stories, and hopefully challenge others through those stories of controlling what they can control in future situations where we can make a difference. So let's see. I want to ask this next question, Janice, and we want to be sensitive to all of this, right? We're learning. I tell you, again, those images we're all seeing, folks that aren't in California directly impacted. It's overwhelming. So your organization, Gifts for Good, supports what we hear, the work of some 80 nonprofits and social enterprises. Get this, folks, in 50 states and 72 countries around the globe. So as someone, Janice, that has dedicated a big chunk of your professional existence to helping everyone else, what has it been like for the tables to shift and kind of be on the receiving aid of help and support?
Yeah, well, I think when Kristi and I were emailing, I said, I was a first responder. I was deployed to Haiti after the earthquake, right? Like, used to going in. So it was a little bit hard to evacuate, because it felt hard for me. But some neighbors went down to my parents. They are elderly. I was like, I don't know if fires are going to come by them, because it was very uncertain. And some other neighbors came down and stayed there too. And my colleague who's in Orange County, she said, I'm going to make you guys a meal because now your family is hosting all these people unexpectedly. And so there is just so much kindness. I am fortunate. I just returned home. My home is fine. But I know, it's impossible to live in LA and not know at least a handful of people who lost everything. So I think I'm definitely shifting out of, someone paying attention to me, and how do we focus on others as myself and as a business? How do we support our community?
So, Kristi, I'll get you to respond to that. And I've got one quick follow-up question about the first responder angle. Kristi, your thoughts on what you just shared there, making that shift, which I love.
Well, I think, we as Americans it's really hard for us. And a lot of us are in very privileged positions. Thank goodness, I've never had to live through something like this, but I am happy to jump in and help somebody else. But asking for help is really hard for me. And I think it's difficult for a lot of us who are used to being in that position. So when Janice mentioned that, when we were emailing back and forth, I thought I would have the same issue, the same struggle, trying to ask for help and need it. Even somebody's LinkedIn post, I was reading, they lost their house. They kind of told a little bit of their story. And then she kind of ended with, I forget exactly how she said it, but she was like, gulp, here's my GoFundMe. I'm going to ask for help. And
Wow.
so, just some people having to, make that request on behalf of themselves and ask strangers for money, I think would be incredibly difficult and incredibly brave.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm glad folks are having that eureka moment and are affording the opportunity for the rest of us that are out there to give and directly give aid. So, so if you're watching and you're kind of on the fence, please, there's been such a tremendous loss, and there's more folks that want to help. And that's kind of where we're going next. Well, hang on a second. Before we do that, Janice, I want to ask you one other to comment on your you were talking about being deployed, Janice, a second ago. Where were you deployed? In a disaster zone?
So I used to work in relief and development, and I have been more locally in Southern California with the trucks delivering aid into fire communities. But in 2010, deployed to Haiti about 3 days post earthquake.
Wow.
and that's, very different contexts.
Right.
And I can't compare that devastation, um, because that was incredibly difficult.
Oh
But this,
gosh.
is your own community, and so it's different.
Yeah. Very different. So speaking of the first responders, and gosh, Godspeed to all of our first responders out there. I've already seen so many incredible stories. Back to what your colleague was sharing, and this is one other element in all of this, and there's countless ones to kind of wrap your head around if you're not part of, if you're not being impacted here. Um, I think Laura's husband is a first responder, and he was one of the first ones into some of the areas being impacted. And I think she said in her blog post, which we're going to be sharing, that she delivered the news to 17 of her neighbors and friends that their homes were gone. Janice and
Yeah.
Kristi, can y'all imagine? Janice, I mean, so thankful that your home, it remains. But can you imagine, Janice, to be able to have to bear the burden of sharing that news with someone, huh?
Yeah, no, and people, they want to know, because you don't know when you're not allowed in. You don't know if your home is standing or not. So she had moved 6 or 8 months before the Palisades fire. So she lives in Pasadena now and was evacuated, but her home is okay. But certainly after 8 years, knew a number, that's your community. So when her husband was there, and was able to like confirm some of what, he could see, she was able to communicate that, which brings closure, but also devastation.
Oh, when I read that earlier this week, Kristi, naturally, I think all of us start to think about our own neighborhood, right? And the what ifs. And I could not imagine. I just could not imagine. Kristi, your thoughts. Your thoughts. We're thankful. We're very thankful that Janice, you're back in your home. It is standing, and I'm even more thankful, to your point, the shift you said you're making now that you're kind of regathering your sea legs. You're shifting into, hey, how can I help others? That is admirable. That is so noble. Kristi,
I
your
mean,
comments. I'm sorry, Janice, go ahead.
you keep hearing of people you don't know, because so many people. So over the weekend, I found out that a friend lost everything in the Pasadena fire. And so I was texting with her, and she said, the first few days, all I did was volunteer because I couldn't. So like that was her outlet. So
Mm.
I do think that that is true of Southern California. That it is very much about, it's not just about me, it's about my community and how do I serve, even if I've lost everything.
Oh, man. Kristi?
Yeah, kind of two things. One, we received another email last week from another friend of Vectors, and that has also been on the podcast. He has a brand called Snib Shoes. He also has the Lime Truck food truck in Southern California. His house burned down, and so that was much to what Janice just said. He kind of was like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do something. And so started donating some of their footwear to first responders who were doing the job, started working with World Central Kitchen with their food truck. But again, just sort of jumped in so that he had something positive to do and not dwelling. And to the other point, I think, while it would be incredibly difficult to have to be the one to tell your neighbors that their house is gone, I think on the other side, it would be so much more comforting to hear it from somebody who knows and loves you and cares for you, versus certainly the first responders deserve all kinds of accolades for the work that they're doing. But if they don't know you, you're getting the news, of course, but I think it must be so much more comforting to hear it from somebody who does know you personally and can kind of, experience it with you and kind of walk you through the process together and show that kind of empathy.
Yeah. Well said, Kristi. Well said. So speaking of showing empathy in a very actionable way, as we referenced earlier, Janice, you and your team have compiled a list of very vetted and trustworthy organizations that folks can consider if they'd like to jump in and donate to support all the relief operations, recovery operations, and help folks out. We're going to share, I think this is the blog post we've got here, I believe. Y'all double check if you would. Joshua has shared it here. I think this is a blog post, which at the bottom of it has all the organizations. But do you want to share, Janice, a couple that come to your mind that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we care about our first responders. So we have California Fire Foundation and the LAFD Foundation on there, but then also our community foundation. So the California Community Foundation is serving the entire region, and then the Pasadena Community Foundation also has a specific fund for the Eaton fire, which, you know, some of the folks more affected in that fire have less means. Although fire is not discriminatory, and, you know, a number of people have lost everything. But yeah, we had compiled a list because people were asking us, and we've also created our own fund, which as the needs unfold, we'll be able to distribute. So in our gifting software, we allow people that don't want to select a physical gift to sort of, it's called gift forward, you know, kind of like gift it forward. And there's a number of impact options that, you know, we have for what's important to people, but we do have an LA wildfire page in our software. So we'll also, as the needs start to unfold, because this is going to be a long-term effort of how we can deploy those funds in our community as well.
I tell you, getting back in the home and turning things around and shifting gears to how you can help give forward and help others. I admire that so much, Janice. And folks, I've got the blog article open on a different screen. That's why I'm looking over here. But the California Fire Foundation, World Central Kitchen, Project Hope, the Lang Foundation, if I said that right, and others you'll find on that post. Again, these are folks that Janice and their team vetted, and you can trust where your dollars are going. I would just add one on my end that I can personally vet, and that's Kathy Fulton and the team over at the American Logistics Aid Network, Allen. They do outstanding work. And if you can't support, go to Allen and probably some of these other resources to be more informed, which who knows, it might help you uncover a way to help others out and give forward. So, Kristi, I bet you're familiar with a lot of these organizations. I bet you've interviewed some of them. Any thoughts in terms of any other thoughts in terms of how folks can kind of hopefully put their generosity hat on and take action?
Yeah, as individuals, I think those are all terrific options. I can also, as I mentioned in the beginning, personally attest to using Give Forward. It's very easy. It's a terrific platform, and super easy to utilize. And I'm excited that they have a California wildfires option on there. Of course, we are talking to a majority logistics audience. So I will also plug Allen, the American Logistics Aid Network. Amazing organization. Not only can you donate, but if you are up for doing anything in kind now or in the future, or even if you didn't get a chance to help with the flooding and the hurricanes, then they always have an ongoing needs list that logistics companies can jump in and say, sure, we'll move these pallets, or we'll do this, or we'll offer a consultation, or there's plenty of ways that companies can get involved, and they do amazing work and probably aren't well known enough.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We do have an episode with Kathy, yes.
I want to plug
The Watch Duty app, if you haven't heard of it, because it was brand new to, I think, most of us in Los Angeles, but it is a nationwide app for fires. It is run by retired firefighters. It is incredibly factual. The alerts would come up if there's a new fire by me, if I'm in an evacuation node, the maps, where the resources are, incredibly, incredibly helpful. So it's a great, they're also a nonprofit. So you could donate to them, but I would encourage everyone to download the app just to have that resource if anything pops up around you.
And again, that's the Watch Duty app.
Watch Duty, yes.
Okay. All right. So y'all check that out. Sounds like you can support their efforts by downloading the app and be more informed. Mm-hmm. And then if you're in position, of course, you can also financially support. But going back to all those organizations that your team has vetted and knows well, Please, folks, as my good friend Greg White used to say, give a little, give a lot, but just give, right? Just give. You mentioned Los Angeles a couple of times through the conversation. Of course, we identified what Angeleno means, which I'm a little bit slow sometimes. But Janice, out of everything you've seen, which is a lot, and you're still, I'm sure, digesting and will be for a long time and reflecting, what's been one thing that's made you most proud to be an Angeleno from what you've seen?
Oh, this city is incredibly resilient and creative. I have seen the outpouring of neighbor helping neighbor, and it doesn't matter who you are. I saw there was live news coverage, and it was right when the Palisades fire broke out, and people were leaving their cars, and there was this one guy trying to move the car as if the keys were there, and they said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Steve Gutenberg." So it doesn't matter. You could be a celebrity. He was out there. Like, everyone was doing what they saw around them. And I think we are going to continue to kind of reinvent and help one another and do it more sustainably. So I am incredibly proud of how I've seen the city come out for one another.
I love your sentiment, and I love that example. And the best part about that example is Steve Gutenberg from the clip that I saw is he didn't even, I would think a lot of celebrities, if they don't get recognized, they want to correct somebody from what I've seen. But he was just like, he was okay just being someone on the street, helping others, sharing information. There was
that
no
newscaster had no idea who he was.
That's true. That is so true. And there was a breath of fresh air in that exchange. And also, I think a lesson to be learned, because as you said earlier, Janice, fire doesn't discriminate. Natural disasters do not discriminate. And it really shows we're truly all in it together, whether we like it or not, much like the pandemic, right? And that phrase that really rose to prominence during the pandemic. And if I get this wrong, Kristi, correct me, but I think it's we may be in different boats, but we're all going through the same storm, right? And that one moment, little exchange with Steve Gutenberg was intriguing. Kristi, your thoughts before we start to wrap here with Janice?
I love that. I'm going to have to go find that. I haven't seen it yet, but of course we've seen lots of people using their platforms, large and small, to bring these stories to life, and it's encouraging. And I think the thing that Janice mentioned early on, as well as is just that all of these tragedies, there is a lot of work to do, even when the news cycle changes, even when even we're looking forward to the day when the fires are all 100% contained and then out, and there will still be lots of work to do. So continue to look for opportunities to serve and to share, and use your resources to be a positive influence.
That's right, Kristi. And to kind of to your point, long after this story leaves the headlines, there's going to be work to be done for a long, long time. So, folks, we again, I want to call attention to this blog post for two big reasons. Others, but two big reasons. You'll be, it'll blow you away for a little while just processing what Laura shares on the top end, and then on the bottom end of the blog article, very actionable, easy ways, vetted organizations to support in some way, shape, or form. So check that out. Also, our team that doesn't miss a beat. Look here, Janice, the Watch Duty app, and you can, they've got the link. You're one click away to check out that nonprofit and that technology to be more informed and perhaps support the good work they do. And I'd be remiss if I didn't share once more the Logistics with Purpose episode, where Kristi and the team dive deeper into Janice's story, and of course, what the cool things, wonderful things that their organization's doing. And I bet, Janice, my hunch is, while this, of course, is terribly disruptive and it's impacted so many lives, my hunch that Gifts for Good team, they're going to be back to business, helping so many others. I mean, you already are, based on what I'm hearing here today.
That is absolutely. That is our mission as a company, is to support communities, and so of course we're going to support our own. So absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we had a lot more time. I wish, you know what? I wish I had a couple of trucks, Will's Wells Fargo trucks to send y'all's way with all the resources in the world. But collectively, we can make that impact. And I really appreciate you being here, sharing your experiences and challenging all of us, to jump in and help support. So Janice Steverding, Chief Impact Operations Officer with Gifts for Good. Thanks so much for being here, Janice.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me and for all the good work that you guys do, because like I said, logistics is often at the core of these issues. So thanks for what you do, and thanks for telling our story.
You bet. And we'll be here. We'll have you back, get some updates on this. And also big thanks to Kristi Porter, the entire Vector Global Logistics team, for introducing us to Janice and the wonderful Gifts for Good organization. Gotta love on Logistics with Purpose, Kristi, you and Enrique and Nuri and the whole team over there doing great work. Kristi, thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, shout out to the Gifts for Good team. Before I even connected you with Janice, it's obviously something incredibly difficult they're going through. And so before I made the connection, I said, are you okay with coming on live? Are you okay with talking about this publicly? And she and Laura were both like, let's do it. Let's do something. And so that was great. And I was actually emailing with Cecilia on their team yesterday about a technical issue I had, and she responded right away. And I thought, why don't these people have an out of office or something on their email instead of, my piddly little concern?
Wow.
And so just grateful for their whole team. And we have lots of course, friends in common in Southern California. And there's lots of people who've lost a lot in Southern California. And so keep sharing your stories because it matters.
Yeah, it does matter. It does matter. Big thanks again, Kristi Porter and Janice Steverding. Folks, all of you out there that stepped in to this live and pretty spontaneous conversation here today, thank you. First off, thank you very much. But also, if we may, ask for one thing, right? Find a way. By my count, I think there's 37 things that Janice and Kristi mentioned that you can do, small and big, to help those in need. Take action, right? Lip service leadership is for the birds. It's all about deeds, not words. And lots of folks are in need. So with all that said, hey, on behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now team, Scott Luton challenging you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.